Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about just how hysterical anti-white racism is at the moment. Fully supported and funded by all your white elected representatives all across the Western world. Anything other than elite whites who are part of the globalization project, any whites other than in that group must be crushed and eradicated, their history destroyed, and so on. And that's certainly something that's moving along at breakneck speed. And there's no shortage, certainly, of black and brown people that are prepared to gleefully go along with this as a way of excusing their own inadequacies. But just looking, at the, I suppose there's a couple of things. I'll do another video on this one. I noticed that in the elite universities around the West now, remember, this is the West. This is not in Africa or China or something. The elite universities in the West, that around 10% of the new student admissions are white people. Again, this is in the West. It's not in Africa. 10%, 1 in 10, some in 1 in 9 in some places, but is so the amount of black affirmative action students. This is students that don't come anywhere near to making the grade on merit for university admission. That there are more black affirmative action students being taken into university than there are white students on merit. And the majority of the white students taken in are female. So that just gives you an idea as to how things are going. And I did a video recently where in Australia now that the statistics, alleged statistics, are where over 90% of the students that are coming in the top grades in graduation from high school to university, the top students are non-white, and this is a matter for some celebration. Now, isn't it incredible that all across the Western world you're getting almost exact same statistical outcomes? So clearly it's being orchestrated from downtown central here. This is no fucking organic thing, far from it. This is something that's premeditated, organized, scripted, arranged, and artificially pushed through. Now, in some of these universities, of course, they want the money for the rich Chinese students that come, but these students, again, they're not anything to do with merit. They're coming from rich parents, very entitled sort of households where they're paying big bucks to go to university, and as far as they're concerned, they've paid the money and they want the fucking degree. This idea that it's just simply access to a prestigious university, get a quality education. This is dismissed out of hand. That's silly white person bullshit. I got to pass an exam based on merit. You got to be fucking kidding me. Give me that fucking degree. I've paid the big bucks. And by the way, if you don't pay the big bucks, we'll just make sure no more Chinese students come. So anyway, these universities, that's how they afford to pay for their massive diversity and inclusion departments and so on. But I particularly wanted to look at the anti-white racism in a broader sense of would it affect where you, regardless of whether you're white or not, would it affect where you want to live or what would be prepared to live, or if you would move away from an area where, assuming you're white for the moment, where the white people are a minority or have become a minority or whatever. Now, I've got some little bit of experience with this. Again, as I've mentioned sort of many times, I've done a huge amount of business traveling to many countries that are not white. And for me, I'm quite used to, well, not at first, I guess, but I'm quite used to being in a restaurant where I'm the only white person, or a hotel lobby, or walking around the street where seeing a white person is something of a novelty, and people stare and look because they either haven't seen a white person before, or it's only been on maybe a TV show or something like that. So anyway, I'm quite used to it, and even say in regional airports where. In a non-white country, in regional airports, so frequently I've been the only white person there, which has been a novelty even for the airport staff. So I'm used to it, and I don't really, it doesn't really sort of affect me at all. It's like, okay, so what? But in an area where we were living, quite some years ago now, but um, we had an apartment there which suited the work that we were doing at the time. It was close to a major train and bus interchange. I won't say close, a 10-minute walk or something, to a major bus and train interchange. There were some quite good shops and restaurants walking distance away, and it was really a convenience. Probably not an area we'd have chosen to live in outside of the many conveniences, logistical type conveniences, but nonetheless, well, it was fine, and there was a nice sort of leafy little nature reserve right outside the balcony, and that's so it was okay, no complaints. And just as the mass migration was really kicking off, there was a huge influx of particularly Chinese investors came in, buying up the apartment blocks in the area and a lot of freestanding houses, that sort of thing. And so there was a huge influx of, once they'd done that, they then moved, masses of Chinese peasants. Again, these are people, literate peasants from the rural areas, were moved in into all the apartments around. So it went from being only white people in the apartment block we were in, which wasn't a big apartment block. There was only like 10 or 12 apartments in the block. It went from being all white people to being we were the only white people in the block. And so I was talking to a guy, one of the guys who he's a white guy, but he seemed to be organising a lot of he was like I don't know, go-between agent for organising a lot of the rentals for people coming in. I thought, why would you rent out an apartment to people who've just arrived from a third world country? They don't speak a lick of English. They only just got jobs as cleaners or something. Like, why would you rent to somebody like that? And so it was an interesting sort of thing that because so many people, they 10 people would move in, because there's so many people there, even though they were making very ordinary money as cleaners and the like, because there were 10 people there, they could actually afford to pay a higher rent. So they could gazump the local white couple that maybe just had ordinary, average wage jobs, but these guys could actually pay more. And so we'll pay you, we can pay you, $100 a week rent, or simplifying the numbers there, $100 a week rent instead of the $80 a week rent you're asking for. So they were doing under the table gazumping. And in some cases, because they're refugees, the government was paying via an NGO or a Quango, or even directly paying for the rent, so that they would get, say, 12 months rent sort of paid in advance, a bit like Serco and all that stuff that's going on in Britain at the moment. So these, there were various sort of reasons and various sort of things going, but there was this sudden and massive influx of people within a few months that the apartment block went from, or maybe 6 months, again, the apartment block went from being all white to being we were the only white couple in there. Now, did I particularly care? And blocks adjacent, like the apartment blocks sort of all around us, and it wasn't a concrete jungle in the sense that the next apartment block was only spitting distance away. It was still, like a fairly tree-lined street and all that sort of thing. Nice parks across the road and so on. But the whole area changed. Now, I don't care. It makes no difference to me. As long as it doesn't affect me, then who cares? But it did. The behaviour of the people did affect. So you'd have masses of people in the park, so much so that you couldn't go there. They'd be they'd be thronging. You couldn't sit in any of the seats. There was like an outdoor gym there. You could never get to it to use it. They were making a hell of a racket and a noise, and they seemed to be unable to. Their children couldn't seem to behave. They were just running riot and all over the place. There were people coming from rural areas where you set up a stove, like a camp stove, in the middle of the lounge room floor, and you had a big chopping board where you chopped up all your meat and vegetables and did the big stuff. And they were doing that in the apartment block, and there were various fires and fire alarms because there's so many people cramped into apartment. The dramas and the arguments were just constant. They just never stopped, and the screaming and the shouting and the accusation. Now, where some of them spoke Mandarin, because my Mandarin at the time was pretty good. I could work out what was being said, and they were making, in Chinese, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. It was just all the time, and so having a look at that, and the endless dramas, and even if they moved out, the Chinese group moved out, then other people would move in, and they could be, again, Middle Eastern refugees, again, drama and shouting and carrying on, and all sorts of. And the area, it just became untenable. I can't get away from this place quick enough. So we decided that no matter what the logistical benefits of living there were, and there were a lot, by the way, we did like. We did like the access to transport and shops and restaurants, all that sort of thing. It just was not we had enough. Even sort of 11 o'clock at night, you're in bed, and there'd be this screaming would carry on across the road where these wherever they'd come from, these people, again, some third world country, they're illiterate in English. It's nice to have people around you that speak your language, you can, relate to, even if it's on a casual basis in the hallway, hey, how are you today? And even if it's the basic stuff like that. But that wasn't how it was. Nobody spoke a lick of English, and in spite of the government insisting that only people that spoke good English could get into Australia through the immigration system, this clearly wasn't the case. Also, quite a lot of brutality. And some of the women, I don't know what the relationship was to some of the men, but you got the impression that some of the women there were being kept as sex slaves or something like that for the men in the apartments. But not that I can vouch for that for sure, but it seemed that way. And some of them were sporting sort of fat lips and black eyes that suggested that all was not well. But anyway, this was it. So we decided we wanted to move. Now, it had nothing to do with race or that I cared about race, or either of us cared about race. But it did have everything to do with behaviour. The area changed very quickly from being quiet and peaceful, where everyone was well behaved and respecting each other's space, to suddenly being a fucking riotous madhouse, where these people from the third world were directly importing their third world habits into the West. Now, if ever I was, and bear in mind I was on business, not as a migrant, but whenever I was in other countries, I was acutely sort of sensitive to the local ways of behaving and customs and habits. Now, I wasn't sure about it, or was concerned about inadvertently giving offence or something like that, or about fitting in, I would stay in the hotel, which I had the option of doing, by the way, as a business traveller, that a migrant may not. But even so, it was my duty to change for their benefit. I had to fit in with them. Sure, I was the Western guy with the Western goods and services they wanted, so they had to fit in with the business side of it. But in every other respect, I had to fit in with them and do what they wanted. Behave in a way that was at least not contradictory to their own lifestyles and so on. So I kept, again, if I was unsure, I kept to myself. But these people don't. They have no idea, absolutely no inclination at all. Nobody wanted to fit in with the Western society they'd come to. So they've come to Western society in Australia with not the slightest inclination or intention or anything to fit in. They are just arriving with 100% entitlement, and again, not thinking they have to fit in at all. They're here to take, not to give, and certainly not to share. And you explain, well, that's not how people do things here. You don't set up fires in the middle of the lounge, and that's why you got a stove. You don't put chopping boards on the floor and start chopping up your, that's not how it works here. Hey, don't care, buddy. I'm living my life the way I. Well, why come to another country if all you want to do is live the way you did? Don't you want to come to this country and enjoy the benefits of it? And you can do that better by assimilating. No, I'm here to take your money and get your jobs. I'm not here to fucking fit in, damn white boy. So there's a very different attitude to good manners, sophistication, and so on. Now, if these people had all come from the cities and they come from, they've got decent jobs, or they've had a city high school education, college education, that type of thing, then I'm sure they would have behaved differently. But those people tend to be better off, and they'd probably go into wealthier areas. We were in sort of the middle of the middle, if you like, rather than at the apex or anywhere near it. So this is but this is my experience, and because of that, we decided that we needed and wanted to move. We had nothing against anyone personally or anything like that, but there's other things too. There's a certain sort of brand of cruelty that a lot of the Asian people have. I think it's because they're so, their lives are short and brutish themselves, so they seem to delight in watching a terrified animal being attacked by a predator. They seem to really get off on it, like really enjoy it. They'll have time when they'll just bring their Asian friends over to watch this. So there's a, and I heard it and could see it from a distance. I wasn't even sure what it was at first, but where this bunch of Chinese people, they get together, they somehow trapped a local marsupial, like a koala, that sort of thing. They've trapped a local marsupial and put it in a cage. Then they'll get a constrictor snake or an owl or some predator of these things, and then they'll actually get their buddies and people to come over and watch as the predator chases the terrified marsupial around the cage until it gets it and kills it. And on one occasion, I could hear the terrified screams of the marsupial as it was being, chased and then torn to pieces. And at the same time, these Chinese onlookers were celebrating, clapping, and they were clearly enjoying it and getting off on it. I can't even conceive of an attitude like that. That seems astonishing to me. But to them, it was clearly, top drawer entertainment. And so very, very different people who have, really no intention of. Now that's illegal. That species that was being torn to pieces there by their little spectacle. That's a protected species by law. You can get 3 months in prison and a $10,000 fine for doing that. But you try and bring it to the attention of local authorities, nobody cares. To even investigate it would be evil, wicked, Nazi, fascist racism. But to me, it's not. You come to this country, you abide by the fucking laws. Anyway, we moved from the area, and today we're in an area that's sort of 99. We moved to a different area anyway in between, but today we're in an area that's 99% white. But I just want to talk about the well-to-do areas why do working class people oppose mass migration and multiculturalism? Why do rich people, but by contrast, tend, or not even rich, but quite well-to-do, support the mass migration? Now, the wealthy people aren't affected by the mass migration in their day-to-day lives. They their children go to the wealthiest schools where it's $50,000, $60,000 plus a year to send your kids there. Per child. They live in areas that are, where again entry levels $3 million plus to even get a shit box in that area, and where average prices are between $5 and $6 mil. They have $250,000 worth of motor vehicle in the driveway. They spend $200,000 a year on vacations. They're people in that league. and so they don't come across the day-to-day effects of mass migration. They might complain that the roads are busier or something like that, but that again, that they've got various options where they can decide, oh, today I'll work from home, or they've got some flexibility in their lives that the 9 to 5 lower paid worker doesn't have. So the mass migration is people tending to move into the lower middle and working class areas, and so they're changing those areas quite drastically, or areas that are close to good transport hubs, as I experienced or we experienced earlier, that I mentioned. So the rich people that don't get to see, when I go and have lunch with I live in an area that's nearly all white, but when I go and have lunch or dinner or hang out with these well-to-do folks, they're all big supporters of mass migration, but in an ideological sense. There's no real world practicality to their views, because they don't come across it. Nothing affects them, and they'll quite openly say, "Hey, I don't mind this mass migration. I think it's great, but I don't want those people anywhere near me. I don't want those people anywhere near my daughter." So they're very racist in not wanting these people around, whilst at the same time supporting the mass migration. But it's only because of their wealth they can avoid the reality of the mass migration, the reality on the ground. They can avoid that. But working class people or people not as well off as them, they can't avoid it. They can't get away from it. Just where we live now, it's probably the properties are maybe, I don't know, 40% above the average or something like that. But if we went to an area where the properties are ping-ponging around the average in terms of pricing, we'd also have to put up with people being around who aren't white. Now, that doesn't mean we're friends and we're buddies, bosom buddies with everyone around us because they're white, but it's quiet, it's peaceful, people mind their own business. We say hello to everybody in the mornings if we see them. We can all talk the same language. We've got more or less the same values and behaviors and so on. And because of the values, behaviors, and the language, I'm fine with this. I don't care if somebody's not white. So this idea or suggestion of white people having a particular issue with non-white people, I don't accept that. I think it's a behavioural difference. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.